Have you ever noticed some people hate being alone? They need noise. Messages, constant conversation. The TV is always on. Music is always playing. Notifications never stop. Silence makes them uncomfortable. It feels heavy, almost threatening. But then there's another type of person. The one who actually feels better in silence. The one who cancels plans and feels relief instead of guilt. The one who enjoys staying in on a Friday night with their own thoughts. They're not bored. They're not lonely. They're comfortable. And here's the part most people misunderstand. This isn't something that needs to be fixed. In many cases, it's something that needs to be understood. Because psychology suggests this might not be a weakness. It might actually be a reflection of how your brain is wired. So if you've ever felt different for enjoying your own company, if you've ever wondered why you feel drained around people but recharged when you're alone, this video is going to make a lot of things click. Let's start with the first sign. Your brain gets overwhelmed faster. Some people can spend hours in loud environments and feel energized. They go to crowded places. They talk to multiple people at once. They jump from one conversation to another and somehow gain energy from it. But then there are people who walk into that same room and feel their energy drop almost instantly. After 20 minutes, they're exhausted. After an hour, they feel completely drained. That's not attitude. That's not rudeness. That's wiring. Research suggests that some brains process information more deeply. Every sound, every word, every shift in tone, every facial expression, every subtle social cue, it all gets picked up and analyzed. So instead of filtering out the noise, your brain absorbs it, all of it, at once. And that requires energy. A lot of energy. So when you're in a noisy room, your brain isn't just there. It's working overtime. It's analyzing, interpreting, predicting, and eventually it gets overloaded. That's why silence doesn't feel empty to you. It feels like recovery, like your system finally cooling down, like your mind can finally breathe again. Sign 2, small talk feels exhausting. You can do it. You know how to smile. You know how to respond. You know how to follow the script. But it feels repetitive, predictable, empty. Conversations about the weather, the same questions, the same answers, the same surface-level exchanges that never really go anywhere. And again, this isn't about judging other people. It's about what your brain finds meaningful. Some people genuinely enjoy light conversation. It helps them connect. It helps them relax. But for you, it often feels like noise without substance. Like eating food that has no nutritional value. You can consume it, but it doesn't satisfy you. You find yourself craving something deeper, something real, a conversation where you can explore ideas, where you can question things, where you can actually think instead of just respond. That's why you might stay quiet in group settings, not because you have nothing to say, but because you don't feel like saying something just for the sake of filling space. Sign 3, your inner world is very active. When you're alone, you're not doing nothing. You're thinking, imagining, replaying conversations, analyzing situations, connecting ideas, planning the future, questioning the past. There's a constant flow of mental activity. And in psychology, there's something called the default mode network. It becomes active when you're not focused on the outside world, when you're not reacting, but reflecting. That's when your brain starts making deeper connections. That's when creativity happens. That's when insights appear out of nowhere. So while someone else feels bored when they're alone, you feel engaged. Your mind becomes your environment. Your thoughts become your stimulation. And that's why solitude doesn't feel like emptiness. It feels like space. Space to think. Space to create. Space to understand. Sign 4, you don't depend on external validation. Many people rely on feedback to feel okay. Likes, comments, messages, attention, approval. It becomes a cycle. You do something, you wait for a reaction, and that reaction determines how you feel. But when you're comfortable being alone, something shifts. You start developing internal validation. You learn how to evaluate yourself without needing constant input from others. You don't need a room full of people to feel worthy. You don't need constant reassurance to feel secure. And this doesn't mean you don't care about others. It just means your sense of self isn't entirely dependent on them. You can sit with yourself and feel okay. And in a world that constantly pushes external validation, that's rare. Sign 5, you choose quality over quantity. You don't need 100 connections. You don't need to know everyone. You don't need to be everywhere. You'd rather have a few meaningful relationships than a long list of acquaintances. Because you feel the difference. You notice when a conversation is real, when someone is present, when someone actually listens instead of just waiting to speak. And once you experience that kind of connection, everything else starts to feel shallow. So you become selective, not because you think you're better than others, but because your energy is limited, and you want to invest it where it actually matters. That's why you might have fewer friends than most people, but the ones you do have mean more. Sign 6, you use solitude to think clearly. Most people consume information constantly. Social media, videos, opinions, news, content never stops, but very few people actually process what they consume. It just piles up, layer after layer, noise on top of noise. But when you spend time alone, something different happens. You slow down, you reflect, you revisit ideas, you question them. You ask yourself, do I actually believe this? Or did I just hear it somewhere? Does this make sense? Or does it just sound good? This process is called metacognition, thinking about your own thinking, and it's one of the most powerful cognitive skills a person can develop. It allows you to filter truth from noise, to build your own perspective instead of just inheriting one, and that process requires silence. It requires space. It requires time away from constant input. Sign 7, you're not afraid of your own mind. This is where everything comes together. Because for many people, silence is uncomfortable. Not because it's empty, but because it reveals things. Thoughts they've been avoiding, feelings they've been suppressing, questions they don't want to answer. So they fill the silence, constantly, with anything that distracts them. But if you enjoy being alone, it usually means you've learned how to sit with yourself. You've faced some of those thoughts. You've explored parts of your mind that others try to avoid. And instead of running from them, you've made peace with them. You've built a relationship with your own thoughts, and that changes everything. Because when you're no longer afraid of being alone with yourself, you become much harder to influence, much harder to manipulate, much harder to shake. Now, here's something important to understand. Enjoying solitude doesn't automatically mean you're an introvert. And being introverted doesn't automatically mean you're intelligent. These things are more nuanced, but there is a pattern that shows up again and again. People who are comfortable being alone often have a strong internal world, a strong thinking process, a strong sense of self, and that combination changes how they interact with the world. They don't chase every opportunity to socialize. They don't feel the need to be constantly seen. They don't measure their value by how many people are around them. Instead, they focus on depth, on clarity, on meaning. You might notice this in small ways, like preferring a quiet morning over a busy night, enjoying long walks without headphones, getting lost in your thoughts while doing something simple, needing time alone after social interactions, not because you didn't enjoy them, but because your brain needs to reset. These are not flaws. These are signals. Signals that your mind operates differently, that your energy works differently, that your priorities might be different from the majority. And that can feel confusing, because the world often sends a very specific message. Be social, be visible, be active, be everywhere. If you're not constantly interacting, something must be wrong. If you're not surrounded by people, you must be lonely. But that's not always true. There's a difference between isolation and intentional solitude. A faint stick figure is shown with the schematic chain around its foot in a dark sepia area. A large yellow arrow points at the chain. It feels empty. It feels like something is missing. Solitude, when chosen, feels different. It feels calm. It feels full. It feels like being exactly where you need to be. So if you recognize yourself in these patterns, Maybe it's time to stop trying to fit into a model that was never designed for you. Maybe it's time to stop labeling your preferences as problems, because enjoying your own company is not a weakness. It's a skill. It's the ability to exist without constant distraction, the ability to think without interruption, the ability to understand yourself without external noise. And here's the paradox. The more comfortable you become being alone, the more meaningful your connections with others become, because you're no longer interacting out of need. You're interacting out of choice. You're not looking for someone to complete you. You're looking for someone to share space with. And that changes the entire dynamic. It removes pressure. It removes dependency. It creates authenticity. So maybe being alone isn't something to escape. Maybe it's something to explore. Maybe it's where you actually get to know who you are without influence, without expectation, without performance. Because when everything becomes quiet, you finally hear what matters. Your thoughts become clearer. Your priorities become sharper. Your decisions become more aligned. And in a world full of noise, that clarity is powerful. So if you see yourself in these signs, don't rush to change it. Understand it. Use it. Build around it. Because the ability to be alone and feel at peace is not common, but it might be one of the most valuable things you can develop. Which of these signs felt the most accurate for you? Write it in the comments. And if this video made you see yourself differently, subscribe for more psychology content like this.